Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and you can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Also, don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. I'm going to have a story up on Thursday about a couple getting away from the defense, folks, and I'll get to that with my guy Michael Phillips here in a minute. But I'm getting away from the defense and some what-if scenarios because one of the last times they played the Miami Dolphins, it may have been the last time, Michael, was the two-point conversion game down in Miami. First win of the season, game ball to Callahan, cost Joe Burrow.
Ryan Fitzpatrick,
but it cost him Joe Burrow. So it's one of those what-if scenarios. Do they have their guy now in Sam Howell? Anyway, you can read that on ESPN. So as you can see, and you can probably hear already, Michael Phillips used to be with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Now filling in for Matt Paris with the Washington Times for our dear guy departed to New Orleans, New Orleans.
This is going to be like when Jim Harbaugh left and the assistant coach was crying during the post-game interview and like, oh my gosh, is Jim Harbaugh dead? Like, I'm just trying to honor Matty Paris, man. Just trying to do my best.
All right, the podcast's off to a bad start because I do not like that guy. Anyways, so that's an Ohio State guy.
All the time.
Anyway, it's been nice having you on.
Can I give a shout out to one of my old Times Dispatch guys, Paul Woody, who was inducted into the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame this week.
That is fantastic. Yeah. I didn't know that. And Paul Woody covered the team for
40 years.
Could you imagine doing it that long?
Not with that much losing. Like, yeah, he saw some good ones at the start.
He did.
I could do 40 years the way he did it in the 80s.
I'm pushing that, and I haven't seen those years. I haven't seen. I mean, it's funny because you go back and like I was talking to my wife about this. Like, beat reporters, you go back and you add up your record of the team you covered for the time you covered it. I'm afraid to do that.
Ooh.
I mean, like our guy in New England, Mike Reese, has covered more Super Bowls than I've covered playoff games.
Oof.
And I've covered the team. This is my 30th year.
Yeah.
I did not cover the same team. But by the way, Paul Woody was fantastic. Really good longtime beat reporter, but then columnist as well.
Yeah, but before this, I was at the University of Kansas where I saw equally terrible football. So I'm used to it. We had good basketball there at least, but I'm used to it.
Well, I grew up rooting for the Cleveland Browns and I covered this.
That'll do it.
I don't know. I saw somebody really wanted to stick it to Johnny. So
it's your lot in life.
And listen, if the worst thing in my life is covering a team that can't win, this has been pretty good. And it's still enjoyable to talk about football. So everybody out there understand that. But which gets us back to this team, which isn't as enjoyable. But I'm like,
There's reasons to watch. There's reasons to tune in.
Give me the reasons to tune in.
I want to tune in. I want to find out, let's look at the secondary. Which of these guys do you want to keep next year? You got $90 million in cap space. Nobody's safe when you have $90 million in cap space. Let's look at the offensive line. Chris Paul. Is Chris Paul a guy who, when the new regime comes in, do they say, like, we can deal with that for a year? Or is that an immediate priority? To start, right? You got to figure those things out.
No, you're right.
He's got 5 games to prove you wrong, John Keim.
Yes.
When he has that pancake block and points up to the press box, now we'll know why. You're excited to watch the prove it guys here come into the end. Curtis Samuel, certainly a lot to prove still, and has had a really good season. You watch the continued growth of Sam Howell. Every play, there's 11 guys out there. That was one of the more ridiculous stories I saw. Like, that kicker missed the kick for the Patriots because he was in on the tank. Like, when that kicker is working at a Starbucks next year, I promise you he wasn't in on any tanks. And
it's funny because this is one thing, going back to my little what if story, talking to John Allen about that Miami game, the 2-point conversion game.
Yeah.
And he's like, he goes, I know that fans are all into you guys should tank, you should tank. He goes, we're still playing to win because it costs you your job.
Yeah.
If you don't. Now, some guys are going to be secure, but you really don't know. Most guys, even like a John Allen, you don't know what a new coach might say or think.
Casey Tuhill. Casey Tuhill's got 5 weeks to prove that a team needs to pick him up next year, or that this team needs to pick him up next year.
And I think, listen, Sam Howell still has to be in that boat, regardless. Like, I would be perfectly fine building around him for next year. Would you?
Sure. And now you're talking about too, if you have a top 5 draft pick,
there's the question.
And one of these guys you fall in love with during the process, right? That we've made this mistake. They've made this mistake so many times before, right? The Chase Young year, you said, what if they drafted a quarterback? When Gruden comes in, agrees to work with Robert, what if he had gotten to draft and develop a quarterback? You don't want to start a new era with the same mistake. You need to know what you're dealing with.
Right. And I think, that's going to be the question. Like, if you are sitting there 4 or 5 and there's one of those top, one of those top guys there that you really like, if it's a new coach, you're going to say, okay, here's your guy.
Let's kick the tires.
So, yeah. But so for Sam Howell, you have to still go out and prove, like, not only should you be the starter for obviously the next 5 games you are, but that you continue next year here.
And this is what I've said about Kyler Murray too. If you win, it's not a problem anymore. If they pick at 8, there won't be a guy available that they've fallen in love with.
Right.
If Kyler Murray wins out for the Cardinals, he doesn't have to worry about Caleb Williams replacing him because they won't be able to take Caleb Williams. It's in his own hands to a large degree.
Right. And now you stepped away from this team for a minute, come back. What have you thought of Howell in the time that you've been back covering the team again?
There's so much volume. It's hard to separate the stats, the noise, the production, all those things. As I watch him play and play out, I'm just really impressed by his demeanor. How can you not be impressed by how he shakes plays off, how he takes a big sack, comes back, makes a play. He's better at avoiding sacks than he was week 1 through 5. Is he good enough, though, right? That's the question you ask yourself. He's shown growth over the course of the season. Has he shown enough growth? And let me throw Terry into this mix, too. Does he trust Terry enough, right? Terry's not a receiver who gets that 5 yards of separation, then you throw it to him. Terry's a guy who makes a contested catch. Can he show that trust in Terry to give him the ball down the stretch? I think there's still some things I want to see. I mean, we got the bye coming up here, and I think a lot of people are going to mentally check out. There's a lot I want to see in those last 4 weeks.
And I think, and again, that's where you're playing for jobs. And I do think it is, because again, the Howell question is going to play into the future, because if that's a huge, huge question, right? And so like, I'm curious to see, how does he develop, to your point with Terry, but also some of the nuances of quarterback receiver relationship, which is the little signs are. And there have been a couple of times throughout the year where there's some of the stuff that I've talked to Terry about is like, in this game, we saw it the same way. There was an adjustment and they made the play because there was a play against Atlanta. There was a play a couple of weeks ago, I think against the Patriots, where it's like there was an on-site adjustment they both made, and that's a sign of growth. Does that continue?
I'm also intrigued because the schedule gets really hard late for the offense in particular.
Yes.
Like, you look at the Jets game, nobody's saying like, oh, the Jets game. The Jets have a great defense. Yeah. The Niners have a great defense. You're going to get another run against that Cowboys defense. I don't know if they'll have anything on the line or not. McVay teams are always exceptionally well coached and stout defensively. The difficulty level is going to ramp up along with the expectations for what he does. It's not a gimme that he improves over these last 5.
No, and I think that's the other thing is, how do you measure that improvement? Because you can't just look at the stats.
Nope.
I don't think that's going to be fair, because when you look at like what kind of pressure is he getting, what kind of decisions does he make under duress, because that is part of an evaluation process, and it doesn't, you can't just, you can't dismiss it while he's under pressure. Well, then you can look at what's his role in that. And sometimes it's just like, it was bad luck, right? Sometimes, but what can he do to check out of a play? Check out with how does he help the protection with that? Whatever. Like, there are signs of things that you can weigh when making that decision.
If you're asking me right now, am I comfortable going into next year with him? I am.
Yeah, me too.
And we have 5 games left.
Right. And, because the other thing is, like, what I'd like to see with him is when you build a better line, and when you have, I think they're going to have to add a bigger target as well.
If only some of us could have seen this offensive line problem coming from a distance for several months.
That's the hard part, is that, and I think there are definitely people here who admit now, will say like, well, the line wasn't that great. We knew it wasn't great going into the year. Well, it's been, and I also don't think they were expecting to drop back to pass 89 times a game. But, I think it's coming home more like the fact that they didn't build that. And I think that's obviously a problem. But so you're right. Like, there are things to learn, and even if they lose, like I'm sure for fans, the best thing for them would be Howell plays well, but the defense still stinks, and they can't win another game. So you have a quarterback, you got this, and you can build
the draft position.
And you got the draft position.
And you get one of those nice offensive tackles, something to build.
And that's going to be an offseason thing, because is it automatic that you get one of the offensive linemen, or does the analytics take you to a different a playmaking position?
Yep.
Offseason topic.
Yes.
And it's going to be a good one. So or do you trade back and pick up more capital? To me, this is a long range of section. Here we go.
There we go.
I'm picking up a draft pick for 2025.
Oh,
just in addition to moving back a little bit, but getting one so I can be aggressive next year if need be.
Oh, that's fair.
So
that's
it's
fair.
an Eagles model, and I like what they've done.
build on your what if story though. Trent Williams still playing well. Brandon Sheriff's still out there playing well.
Oh, I have no problem if you
there's
go.
a lot,
if you take,
a lot
like,
of what
Joel,
if, lot of what if out there.
Right, there is, and but like with Sheriff playing well here, they weren't very good.
Nope.
So I think, but if you have the quarterback, and you have the line, because when they had the line, they weren't getting the quarterback.
I'm going to give you a no right now on Marvin Harrison Jr.
No, he won't be there at 4. So, but like that's the kind of guy that could really elevate an offense, especially.
He's fun.
He's different. And I
He's
think
fun.
the one thing you see, like, I mean, as good as Terry is, like guys like AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, they're different.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on Terry.
We're gonna see one of those guys Sunday.
Yes, Tyreek Hill. So, but if you could build that, anyways, that's an off-season topic. But it's all the stuff, the way that you go in the decision. So with the defense, what else are you looking at? Because again, with Rivera taking over as a DC, what are you looking at there?
Yeah, and obviously the key word all week has been playing fast, playing simple, taking it off. And a lot of what that means is going to look like the Senior Bowl out there, right? Like you got everybody's playing their position, single-mindedly doing their thing. And I think it's going to give you a chance to have some of these guys regressed. Like some of these guys Cam Curl, for example, who came in with a lot of hype this season. Has Cam Curl not reached expectations, or has his defense just not reached expectations? And Cam Curl is a part of this defense. I'd love to see him make some plays down the stretch. Obviously, St. Juice is a big one. Still hitting the St. Juice at a good per game ratio, the celebration. But in terms of making the plays, up front on the line, as we mentioned, Casey Toohill, obviously, if James Smith-Williams comes back, contract year for those guys. KJ Henry, is he a guy you can build around? Do you like what you see there? You get to see a lot of guys, and we'll see if Cody Barton comes back, obviously, comes back strong and is an impact player, because we saw what that meant when he left. There's some guys, Jamin Davis will be back sitting in that chair next year.
Yeah, but I think then it's like, for him, it's going to be option 2.
Yeah.
And so like he's got to prove, and he's actually had a pretty fine year, but there are some things they still need at that position. And then like the other ones would be, Percy Butler. He's had some issues deep.
He's getting 100% of the snaps, which is probably too much too soon, but he's also had some time now, a long week and a bye week coming, chance to wrap his head around all that and finish the season strong. Yeah.
So, but I think that's another reason to watch too. The other funny thing, Michael, is that when they say, well, we're going to simplify it. And it's really like, you can't make it too simple, but it is funny because I asked Kendall Fuller, what does that mean? He's like, well, we can't really tell you that. So, but there might be some coverage that you just pare down some of what you're doing. The rules are going to stay the same, but
you watch an offensive coordinator that got like the Cheesecake Factory menu, a defensive coordinator sits at a board that has 2 buttons, the kids exotic menu. And simplify. Yeah, kids whichever, if it's not working, you press the other button, and if it's working, you just press your button harder.
There's nothing wrong with the kids menu, nuggets and mac and cheese.
Simplifying, more exotic. Whatever you're doing, if you're not winning, you got to do the other one.
That's right. Well, and what I'd like to see him do, and it's hard to do in this game with the defensive front, is more movement. Problem is, like with Tua, they get rid of the ball so fast that I think it's his time to throw is the fastest in the NFL.
Oh, well, and just a little more
time to pass.
A little more pressure too. We've been playing with that for a while. Saw a little bit of it from Jack at the end, but not enough by any stretch.
What's it like as a beat reporter when the team is out of it, and technically they're still in it, but it's 4-8. It's not looking pretty. Ooh. 5 games left.
This time last go around, I was talking with Tress Way about scented candles. So that's about what we go towards.
I mean, it's all because at this point there's an inevitability to everything.
If I'm ranking my top stories right now that I care about as a person who reports on the team, as a person who's followed this team for a while, number 1, who's the new coach? Number 2, who's the new GM? Right. Like we do. Like we're going to go pretty far down the list.
Coach be ahead of GM for you?
Because not for Harris.
Right.
For Harris,
that's
GM's ahead.
Right. Correct.
In terms of broad fan interest, like I'm probably not ever going to have spoken with the guy who's the GM, and maybe I will have heard of him tangentially.
Right.
Like there's not that wow factor there. Whereas it's very unlikely they hire a coach who I've never heard of or never seen on TV in some context. Right. So that's just got a little more juice to it because you'll know the candidates, you'll know the players. GMs, of course, the far more important hire, especially for these guys.
Do you like how Harris has handled things this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with letting Ron play the whole season, and I'm not going to tell him how to do his business, but it wouldn't surprise me if coming into Week 18 home game against Dallas, there was some kind of, hey, Ron has guided this ship through some really turbulent waters. We just want everybody to know Sunday's going to be his last game. We're going to send him out with a win. We appreciate everything he's done. We're going to do a video montage. Don't boo him off the field after the game. Give him a standing O, because my gosh, that guy has put up with some stuff.
And I think that's a good point. And he has, like, there have been very few coaches that when you look back and say, how would this coach have handled this situation? And it may not have gone very, and I know they didn't win enough. We know that.
Of course.
And they couldn't solve certain positions. And
there was no right choice that when in the hiring process where Ron was hired, there's no name you could have picked that would have transcended this building and everything it went through and built a winner.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is what it also highlights this is why I think the Harris Group is smart, is the GM coach model.
Yes.
You've got to have the separation of powers and just let one guy do this job and one guy do that. And it's funny because even after they hired Rivera in the coach-centric model, I was talking to an agent who'd been around for a while, has had some coaches, has sent a lot of coaches and all that. And he's like, he tells his coaches not to do that. He just thought it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
They had gotten away from that as for his clients because he didn't think it worked. And I think it makes it hard.
It's tough because if you're evaluating Ron, the coach, you'd probably fire him at the end of the year. 4 years, not good results. But if you're evaluating Ron, the GM, you'd probably also fire him at the end of the year. The drafts haven't been good enough. The free agent signings haven't been good enough.
This class has not produced. And there's like last year's class, if Howell hits, is really good. Because, I still think Jahan Dotson can play. Mm-hmm. I just, he hasn't had quite the year I thought he would, or the impact that I thought he
agree.
would. But I also I think, even for Terry, hasn't had the big games that I thought he would. And I think he's a terrific receiver. And I think Jahan's a very good receiver. And I don't know if some of that is, style of offense and having to get to the shorter passes because of protection. That kind of thing, but that part hasn't gone like I thought it would.
13 different guys have caught passes this season. We've seen a lot of B-Rob catching the ball, which I love. He's got great hands. We've seen a lot of passes to the tight ends, which obviously is a signature of the Eric Bieniemy offense. At a certain point, though, your stars need to be stars.
Yes. But going back to as a B reporter, how tough is it in this stretch? Because it is you guys, you're watching the game, you might just turn off and go Christmas shopping.
Yeah.
We're stuck there and we're coming out here. No, stuck there. That's the wrong word. It's our job, which is great. But it's hard. It's not an easy situation.
I love watching football. I love talking with people about football. Yes. I love breaking football down. I'm having fun here right now, but it's harder to get people to do all those things with you. The conversations are shorter. The conversations are less frequent. The people who you reach out to say, what about this play? What about this guy doing this thing? Those people, why am I, why what do you care? Why are we talking? I gotta get my splash reel ready for sending out, this off season. Right. So just the conversations that keep us going on a day-to-day basis, and you even think back to 2013, right? Talking with the McVays of the world, you've seen the graphic before, all those guys,
they were all here at one time. I understand.
I can't. Those conversations that sustain you of talking with football people who are smarter than you, helping you understand football better, making you smarter, which then makes the listener smarter when we relay it to them. Those conversations don't happen as much these days.
And the hard part, even for me, I like to go back and watch the game, right? And then I like to talk about it on here.
Yeah.
Not as many people want to listen to it at this point because, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
And I don't blame people. You want to look, what everybody wants who follows this team is hope. Mm-hmm. Where's the hope coming from? And I think right now it's Sam Howell. That's the immediate hope is right there because if that guy looks good over the next 5 weeks, you can feel good. Hey, maybe whether or not he's an elite quarterback, how many are there like that? So if not, you may just have a really good quarterback, which is better than what they've had for a while. So that's a reason for hope. And then it's who's the next GM and then who's the next coach? That's where you're going to draw your hope upon. It's not going to be from my film breakdowns.
But by May, we'll all be back in.
Oh, by June, by January, whatever, give me the date they hire the coach. They're coming back in because change represents hope as well.
Do you know what keeps me going? Watching those David Tepper press conferences.
Well, how about that?
How happy does that make you that you're not?
Yeah.
I mean, we've lived that. We've lived those days.
The scars are still there, but it is true. I see that. I'm like, this is the guy that you don't want. And I know some people have wish that Harris had made a move earlier, but I'm A-okay with, because there's no like you're not getting in line for the next coach right now. They're not hiring a coach right now.
No.
Everybody,
they won't lose out on anybody.
No.
They won't miss out on anything.
Yeah. And here, let me tell you, just because Carolina's open now, the minute this job opens, it's a better job. And
I think it's number 2 on the board. I think Chargers is a better job.
Chargers because of Herbert.
Sure. But I think this is number 2 on the entire board of all jobs.
I think it's a really good job.
I think it's a great job.
$90 million in cap space, the draft picks, and again, possibly a good young quarterback, depending on how you view him. But I think like most people would say, I like him.
Yeah. The other thing we talk about, owners, we want our owners to be fans. We want them to be there training. We also want them to be smarter than fans, right? And so we've got both in Josh Harris. I think he's a likable guy. I think he is a fan. I think he feels it. He's also a guy who literally said, sit down and watch this crap for 2 years in Philadelphia. Like he is willing to take a big picture. I'm not saying he's going to do that here. I'm just saying he's got that bone in his body that because you're mad after a loss, he's not going to go fire somebody. He once rode this out for 2 entire years of watching this because he knew what it would get him on the other side. Again, he's not going to do that here, but that's what it takes.
He also didn't come in here. I'm sure he had some ideas of things that he had some opinions on things that had happened here the last couple of years, but he didn't come in. Doesn't seem like he came in here with preconceived notions about why it went a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I think when you want to judge a situation, like he seemed like, I'm going to give them a clean slate to show me. That's the kind of guy that I want in charge. So if I'm another coach or GM, that's the guy I want to work for. I mean, he went out and convinced Daryl Morey right away. Now there probably was some money involved, but that's okay. Like I've talked to Daryl Morey about this. I don't know that he wanted to continue doing that. It takes some time off, and he went out and got it right away. He goes out and gets good people, lets them do their jobs, and down the road that is going to pay off. So whatever move you might be mad at this year, if you perceive it as slow, which I don't, I do patient. No. The approach pays off.
It's a great approach. Just doesn't move downloads of the John Keim report.
Not yet.
This time of year.
No, not yet.
The Christmas bonus ham might be a lot of bone this year.
It's the jelly of the month, Clark. It's the gift that keeps on giving, Clark, all year. So that's where we're going with it. But I do like I said, I think they're in good hands, and you brought him the good point with Tepper, and again, outside of Justin Herbert, I like this situation because there's so much. And, it's funny because I saw someone talk about this, like, well, the fans have been coming back this year. Yeah. They're coming back knowing what the product has been, knowing, and even then, like, I think most people probably felt like at best, could you get to 10 wins? I thought they were in that 8 to 9 range, with a chance to get up there if things went well. And you look at the schedule, the way it broke. Chicago, really bad. Giants twice. Oh, there's no way you get swept by them. Those are 3 games. Like,
glad they got that Denver win when they did.
Yeah. Oh, well, that was yes. Yeah. Like, at the beginning of the year, you look at that scenario. It's like that should have been 3 wins.
Yes.
And so you could get there, but they're not good enough. But the point is, like, when you look at it, like, I think the fans will come back. You put a good product out there, they'll be back. And it just, so to me, like, if you're a coach or GM, this is a almost like, I don't know if sleeping giant is the right word, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. I thought it was an 8-9 year. I thought look, this league's designed to get you to 500. Those were 2 fireable offense losses. The Bears and the Giants here. Like, there's no reasonable explanation for what happened.
No, there isn't.
Those games.
No, there isn't. And I think it's if you come back from that, then you can reflect, like, okay, you go out and lose the Bears, but then you go out and beat the Eagles, right? Right. Then it's like, okay, how to handle adversity. That speaks volumes. But the way the defense performed all year was just a disaster, and it wasn't going to happen. But like so that even in those losses, there was a way they could spin that in a positive way, but you had to come back and win. You can't come back and play well. You got to come back and win.
Yeah, and losing happens. Bad football happens. Bad games happen. There have been,
yes, we know, several
embarrassing moments this year. The Bears, the Giants, Dak eating the turkey leg was an embarrassing moment on national TV. You don't want to embarrass yourself.
After the Bears game, I was like, that's one of the worst losses that I've covered here. Just because of how bad, not just because of score, because of how bad they were coming in. They hadn't won.
And still are.
And they were winning 27-3 at halftime. And it's like, I know the Chiefs game a few years ago, but that team was 3-10 going in that game. Yeah. It was the end of so that was there was an ugly game, but it was a bad team going in. This was a team that was 2-1 and, or 2-2.
coming off a really good loss
to
Philly.
Loss, right? Played well, and so like that, and then it's like, but then the Giants game, the DeVito Bowl was like, I don't know, that put it up there. I still think the Bears one is worse, but that one was really bad because you needed to win that game, period. If you that to me was that's going to be part of the last straw.
They could have kept this staff together all year. The Giants game was obviously the beginning of the end. You have to do something,
right? And then like even the Seattle game,
and they did the right something.
Yeah, there's the defense had not played well, and I think to me part of the problem with their D was the lack of. You watch other teams generate pressure. The Cowboys do it. They have a great pass rusher, Micah Parsons. They put him in position to win by being creative with them and letting him use his talent. Mm-hmm. And you just didn't too often hear with the pass rush. It's like, hey, we got 4 guys. Just go beat your guy. And it's like, how many times can you do that? And they're not doing it. So find a way to create some movement, do something to help them. And that wasn't happening. And I know it's not as simple as that, but I mean, if they put me in charge, that's what I'm doing. But in all seriousness, like I would do more of those games up front because I want to create some positive situations for them.
If they put me in charge, I would say, can we wait until next week? I've seen who's coming this.
Come on. Well, that's the other thing. Like, in baseball, I always talk about like have the team meeting before you play a bad team in a series. They changed it before you're playing an explosive team. God bless you. Because this is, but and so what can you do? And I don't want to get into that game. But it's like, what can you do?
You can give up 35 and claim you're doing better. You can.
Yeah. I mean, and this is one where the offense has to have a good game too, because against Dallas, they had a good half moving the ball. And then it's just like when the defense finally did something, they didn't.
Yep.
And that's, you're going to need to help them out more. But again, that's where we go back to the growth. And if, I think if you're a fan, if Howell goes out and plays well in a win or a loss, you're probably going to be happy, right?
Absolutely. Best case scenario, 29-28 Dolphins, 2-point conversion at the buzzer to win.
Let's go back to that.
Howell looked good.
There you go. And that would be it. Got anything else, Michael?
I feel great. Let's go ride this out for the Washington Times this season. And for they are interviewing some quality candidates. I don't know if you get to sit in on the interviews or not to approve room dynamics or not. I'll be back next year either way, though, with my role in Richmond at the radio station at the Fan.
That is a great site. Yeah, tell people where they can listen to you.
So 910 The Fan. I'm on podcast platforms as well. I said the world needs another podcast. There just aren't enough podcasts out there. So we have MP on the mic. That's the podcast, and we'll be doing a lot of VCU basketball. We're the home of the Rams in Richmond, and it's been fun to get to know those guys. Ryan Odom, who coached UMBC as the 16 seed over to that win over UVA, famously in the tournament, is their coach this year. He's a good dude. He's a fun interview. We have some fun.
So, but not because now you have a podcast, you're not just America's podcast guest.
I know. I had to turn in the title.
Yeah.
It was kind of disappointing. For a long time, I had said I will never have a podcast because then y'all won't have any guests. Now I have a podcast. I always have time for the John Keim Report, but it's good to be on the circuit.
It's great to have you back in the room. It'll be great to have you back next year, and so we'll see what happens. Michael, thanks a lot, and thank you for tuning in. I'll be back on Friday with the keys and the prediction for the Miami Dolphins Commanders game. Ooh, tune in.
That's a tease.
Talk to you next time.